On April 23, 2013, Cartoon Network premiered a show that used the same character designs, the same voice actors, and the same theme song as a series that had ended 8 years earlier without a proper conclusion. A series whose fans had spent almost a decade campaigning for its return. The new show was not a continuation. It was not a revival. It was not the answer to the petitions, the fan art, the hashtag campaigns, the letters to the network, or the quiet, stubborn hope that the original Teen Titans would someday come back and finish what it started. It was a comedy, a slapstick, absurdist 11-minute comedy that took the characters people had cried over and made them argue about burritos. The network did not apologize, the creators did not explain, the voice actors, who had spent 5 seasons building characters that an entire generation had grown up alongside, returned to the recording booth and read scripts that asked them to make those same characters argue about who gets the last slice of pizza. The transition was total. The loss was complete. The only thing that remained was the name, and the name was a wound dressed as a welcome mat. They simply aired it in the same time slot with the same faces and waited to see what would happen. The show's creators, Aaron Horvath and Michael Jelenic, were not newcomers to animation. They knew the original series. They knew its fan base. They knew that replacing a beloved show with a comedy that shared its name and characters was going to generate a reaction. What they may not have known, what nobody could have predicted, was the scale of the reaction, the duration of the reaction, and the way the reaction would become inseparable from the show's identity. Teen Titans Go did not just premiere into controversy. It became controversy. The controversy became its genre. And the genre has sustained the show for longer than the original series ever ran. What happened was one of the longest, strangest, most fascinating collisions between a television show and its audience in the history of American animation. And it has not ended. That collision is what tonight is about. Before we go any further, if you enjoy long-form content like this, subscribing helps the channel keep making these videos. It is free and takes a few seconds. Now, back to it. This is Attic. The lights are low, the subject is complicated, and there are 10 of these scandals, each one weirder and more revealing than the last. The first scandal is also the oldest, and it is the one that set the terms for everything that followed. It is the scandal of the replacement itself. The decision to take a show that meant something real to a generation of viewers and replace it with a show that was designed from its first frame to mean nothing at all. To understand why the premiere of Teen Titans Go on April 23, 2013 felt like an act of aggression to a significant portion of its potential audience, you have to understand what the original Teen Titans was and what it represented to the people who watched it. To understand the depth of the wound, you have to understand not just what the original show was, but what it meant to the specific generation that watched it. The children who discovered the original Teen Titans in 2003 were born between roughly 1990 and 1998. They were the last generation to grow up before smartphones. They watched television on actual televisions, at actual scheduled times. In actual living rooms, the shows they loved were not available on demand. They had to be there when the show aired, or they missed it. That constraint, which seems almost quaint in 2026, created a specific kind of relationship between the viewer and the show. The show was an appointment. Missing an episode had consequences. Watching an episode was a commitment. And the commitment was rewarded with stories that built on each other, that accumulated meaning over time, that rewarded the viewer's loyalty with emotional payoffs that could only land if you had been paying attention all along. The original Teen Titans premiered on Cartoon Network on July 19, 2003. It ran for 5 seasons and 65 episodes, ending on January 16, 2006, with an episode called Things Change that left its central storyline unresolved. The show was an action drama with comedic elements heavily influenced by anime in its visual style and storytelling structure. It followed 5 teenage superheroes, Robin, Starfire, Beast Boy, Raven, and Cyborg, as they protected Jump City from a rotating gallery of villains while navigating the specific challenges of adolescence. The show was funny, but it was also capable of genuine darkness. It dealt with identity, betrayal, sacrifice, manipulation, and the particular kind of loneliness that comes with being young enough to feel everything and old enough to understand that feelings are not always enough. The show's fan base was devoted in a way that few animated series have ever inspired. The original Teen Titans was not just a show that people watched, it was a show that people identified with. The 5 characters mapped onto the emotional landscape of adolescence with a precision that felt almost uncanny. Robin was the kid who needed to be in control because everything in his life had been out of control. Starfire was the outsider trying to understand the world that did not come with instructions. Beast Boy was the class clown using humor as armor against loneliness. Raven was the quiet one carrying something too heavy to explain. Cyborg was the one whose body made him different in ways that no amount of confidence could entirely overcome. Every teenager watching could find themselves in at least one of those descriptions. Many could find themselves in all five. The show aired during a specific window of American animation, a window that closed shortly after the show ended and that has never fully reopened. The window was the early to mid-2000s, the golden age of action-adventure animation on Cartoon Network. A period when the network was willing to invest in shows that took creative risks, that told stories across entire seasons, that trusted their audiences to follow complex narratives and engage with mature themes. The shows that defined this era, Samurai Jack, Justice League Unlimited, Teen Titans, Clone Wars, shared a common philosophy. They believed that animation was not inherently a children's medium. They believed that animated stories could be as deep, as complex, as emotionally resonant as any live-action drama. They believed that the constraint of the format, 30 minutes of animation aimed at a young audience, was a challenge to be met with ambition, not a limitation to be accepted with resignation. This philosophy produced some of the most remarkable animated television ever created. Samurai Jack was a meditation on purpose and isolation rendered in a visual style that drew from Japanese ink painting and European modernism. Justice League Unlimited was a sprawling superhero epic that explored political power, moral compromise, and the limits of heroism. Clone Wars, developed by Genndy Tartakovsky, was a visually stunning action series that demonstrated that animated warfare could be as visceral and emotionally impactful as any live-action battle sequence. And Teen Titans sat comfortably among them, a show that earned its place in this company through the quality of its writing, the depth of its characters, and the courage of its storytelling. 2003 to 2006, when Cartoon Network was willing to invest in shows that treated their young audiences as capable of handling complexity, this was the era of Samurai Jack, of Justice League Unlimited, of Clone Wars. The network understood that children's programming did not have to be simple to be successful. It could be ambitious, it could be challenging. It could trust the audience to follow a story that unfolded across seasons rather than resolving in 22 minutes. The original Teen Titans was a product of that philosophy, and its cancellation, along with the cancellation of several other shows in the same mold, signaled the end of the era. When it ended without resolving the storyline of Terra, a character who had been turned to stone in the show's second season finale after betraying the team and then sacrificing herself to save Jump City, fans did not move on. They wrote letters, they created fan art, they produced fan fiction, they launched online petitions, they used the newly emerging social media platforms of the late 2000s to organize campaigns aimed at convincing Cartoon Network to bring the show back. The hashtag Save Teen Titans became a recurring presence on platforms that the show's original audience was aging into. For 8 years, the fans waited. And then, in 2013, Cartoon Network announced that Teen Titans was coming back. Except it was not coming back. What was coming back were the characters, the voices, and the name. Everything else, the tone, the storytelling, the emotional depth, the action sequences, the anime-influenced visual language, the respect for the audience's intelligence, was gone. In its place was a show that looked like the original had been put through a funhouse mirror. The characters were shorter, rounder, simpler in design. The stories were 11 minutes long instead of 22. The plots were built around food, laziness, petty arguments, and bathroom humor. The villains who had been menacing in the original were now incompetent. The relationships that had been complex were now punchlines. The voice actors found themselves in a particularly uncomfortable position. Tara Strong, who voiced Raven, Scott Menville, who voiced Robin, Kari Payton, who voiced Cyborg, Hynden Walch, who voiced Starfire, and Greg Sipes, who voiced Beast Boy, were all returning from the original series. They had built these characters. They had given them voices, literally and figuratively, through 65 episodes of a show that demanded emotional range, dramatic timing, and the kind of sustained character work that most animation voice actors never get to do. And now they were being asked to use the same voices for characters who were fundamentally different, characters who shared names and designs but not personalities, not depth, not the qualities that had made voicing them meaningful. The actors handled the transition with professionalism, and several of them have spoken publicly about enjoying the comedic freedom that Teen Titans Go provides. Voice acting in a comedy is different from voice acting in a drama, and the difference can be liberating. The constraints are looser. The energy is different. The stakes of any individual line reading are lower, which allows for more experimentation, more improvisation, more play. Several of the cast members have described Teen Titans Go as genuinely fun to work on, and there is no reason to doubt them. But the fans did not want to hear that the actors were having fun. The fans wanted the actors to share their grief, to validate their anger, to take a public position against the show that had replaced the show they all loved. The actors' refusal to do so, their professional neutrality, their apparent contentment with the new show felt to some fans like a second betrayal. The characters had been taken from them, and now the voices that belonged to those characters were being used willingly, even enthusiastically, in service of the replacement. Aaron Horvath and Michael Jelenic, the show's creators, were transparent about their intentions. They did not want to make a sequel to the original Teen Titans. They wanted to make a comedy that happened to use the same characters. They saw the original as a starting point, not a template. They wanted freedom, the freedom to tell any kind of story without being bound by the continuity, the tone, or the expectations that the original had established. They wanted to make people laugh. They did not particularly care if the people laughing were the same people who had spent 8 years asking for the show's return. The reaction was immediate, loud, and bitter. Fans of the original series flooded social media with criticism. Review sites were overwhelmed with negative responses. The phrase, "Not my Teen Titans," became a rallying cry for a community that felt betrayed, not by a bad show, but by a show that had taken something they loved and turned it into something they did not recognize. The response was organized with a speed and intensity that reflected the specific dynamics of fan communities in the early 2010s. Tumblr, which was at the peak of its cultural influence, became the primary platform for anti-Teen Titans Go sentiment. Fan artists who had spent years creating illustrations of the original characters began producing comparison images, side-by-side screenshots showing the original designs next to the simplified Teen Titans Go versions, with captions that highlighted every visual detail that had been lost in the transition. The comparison images spread across platforms, from Tumblr to Twitter to Reddit to Facebook, each share carrying the implicit argument that the new show was not just different, but diminished. YouTube became the platform for longer-form criticism. Video essayists, some of whom had been producing content about animation for years, and some of whom were teenagers making their first videos, created what amounted to a cottage industry of anti-Teen Titans Go content. The videos ranged from thoughtful analysis to angry rants, and the angry rants predictably performed better. The algorithm rewarded intensity. The more passionate the criticism, the more views it received, the more videos were produced. The cycle was self-reinforcing, and the show's critics found themselves in a paradoxical position. The more they criticized Teen Titans Go, the more attention they brought to it, and the more attention they brought to it, the more successful it became. For a community that felt betrayed, not by a bad show, but by a show that had taken something they loved and turned it into something they did not recognize. The anger was not about quality. It was about identity. The original Teen Titans was theirs. They had fought for it. They had kept it alive through years of silence from the network. And the network had responded by giving them something that felt, to many of them, like a deliberate insult. The show's ratings told a different story. Teen Titans Go was immediately popular with its target demographic, children between the ages of 6 and 11, who had no attachment to the original series and no reason to resent the new one. The show was funny, fast, colorful, and easy to follow. It required no knowledge of the original. It required no investment in continuity. It was designed to be picked up and put down at any point. And for its intended audience, that design worked perfectly. The generational divide was immediate and defining. Older viewers, teenagers, and young adults who had grown up with the original series saw Teen Titans Go as an insult. Younger viewers, children who had no memory of the original and no attachment to its tone or storytelling, saw a funny, colorful, energetic show that made them laugh. The two audiences existed on the same network, watching the same characters and experiencing completely different shows. The critical response reflected the divide. Professional television critics, many of whom had no personal attachment to the original series, generally received Teen Titans Go positively. They praised its energy, its willingness to experiment with form, its self-awareness, and its ability to function as both a children's comedy and a meta-commentary on the superhero genre. The show won Emmy Awards, it was nominated for Annie Awards, it was included on year-end best of lists. By the metrics that the television industry uses to assess quality, Teen Titans Go was not just acceptable, it was good. But the fan community operated under a different set of metrics, and by those metrics, quality was not the issue. A show could be well made and still be unwelcome. A show could be funny and still feel like a betrayal. The fans of the original Teen Titans did not hate Teen Titans Go because it was bad. They hated it because it existed in the space where the show they loved should have been. It was not a quality complaint. It was a territorial one, and territorial complaints are the hardest kind to resolve because they cannot be answered by improving the thing that occupies the territory. The only answer the fans wanted was the removal of the occupier, and that was the one answer the network was never going to give. The result was a split that has defined the show's entire run. One audience loved it, another audience hated it, and the show existed in the uncomfortable space between those two reactions, successful by every metric that the television industry uses to measure success, and resented by a vocal community that would never forgive it for what it replaced. The production context makes the replacement feel even more pointed. When Cartoon Network greenlit Teen Titans Go, the network was in the process of reshaping its programming strategy. The early 2010s were a transitional period for children's television. Networks were moving away from serialized action shows, which were expensive to produce and difficult to schedule in reruns, and toward episodic comedies, which were cheaper, easier to air in any order, and more effective at generating merchandise sales. The original Teen Titans, with its season-long arcs and complex mythology, was exactly the kind of show that the new strategy was designed to replace. Teen Titans Go, with its standalone episodes and simplified character designs, was exactly the kind of show that the new strategy was designed to produce. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a business decision documented and discussed in industry publications and confirmed by network executives in interviews. The shift away from action-oriented programming was a deliberate strategic choice, driven by data about advertising revenue, merchandise potential, and the viewing habits of the demographic that advertisers most wanted to reach. Teen Titans Go was not created to insult the fans of the original. It was created to serve a market that the original was not designed to serve. The shift also had a philosophical dimension that the network never publicly acknowledged. Serialized action shows require a specific relationship between the show and its audience. The audience has to commit. They have to watch the episodes in order. They have to remember what happened last week. They have to invest in characters over time, accepting that the emotional payoff will come not in a single episode, but across an entire season. This kind of viewing demands attention, patience, and loyalty. Qualities that are valuable in an audience, but difficult to monetize in an era of channel surfing, on-demand viewing, and fragmented attention. Episodic comedies require none of that. A viewer can tune in at any point, watch any episode, and get a complete experience. There is no homework, there is no backstory to catch up on. There is no previous season that must be understood before the current one makes sense. The show is accessible to everyone at all times, which means that every airing is an opportunity to acquire a new viewer, a calculation that matters enormously when your business model is built on advertising impressions. Teen Titans Go was designed for maximum accessibility. Its episodes are self-contained, its continuity is minimal, its characters are defined by a few broad traits that can be understood in seconds. A child turning on Cartoon Network for the first time can watch any episode of Teen Titans Go and understand it completely, without any knowledge of the original series, without any familiarity with the characters, without any context at all. The show is a zero barrier to entry product, and in a television landscape that increasingly rewards accessibility over depth, that design was brilliant. But accessibility comes at a cost, and the cost is everything that the original Teen Titans represented: depth, complexity, emotional investment. The willingness to trust the audience with stories that unfold slowly and reward patience. These qualities are not compatible with maximum accessibility. They require barriers to entry, seasons of backstory, relationships that develop over years, emotional arcs that demand sustained attention. They require the viewer to do work, and the work is what makes the payoff feel earned. The original Teen Titans asked its audience to do that work. Teen Titans Go asked its audience to do nothing at all. And for the fans who had done the work, who had invested years of attention and emotion into the original series, the replacement felt like a statement about the value of that investment. The network had decided that their commitment, their patience, their loyalty was worth less than the casual attention of a child who had never heard of the original and would forget the new show by next week. The message was not intentional, it was structural. But structural messages are often the loudest ones. But understanding the business logic does not change the emotional experience of the people who felt betrayed. A fan who spent 8 years hoping for the return of the show that shaped their adolescence does not care about advertising demographics. They care about the characters they grew up with. And watching those characters transformed into versions they do not recognize, performing comedy they did not ask for, in a show that treats the original's legacy as raw material for jokes, is an experience that no amount of business logic can make painless. The first scandal, then, is not a single event. It is a condition. It is the permanent state of tension between a show and the audience it replaced, between a comedy and the drama it inherited, between a network's strategic interests and a fanbase's emotional investment. It has lasted for over a decade. It shows no signs of resolving, and every other scandal on this list flows from it, because every other controversy that Teen Titans Go has generated exists in the context of a show that was born into a community that did not want it. The second scandal arrived less than a year after the first, and it involved a show that Teen Titans Go did not create, did not cancel, and probably did not intend to harm. But the damage was real, and the anger it generated was, if anything, even more intense than the anger over the replacement of the original Teen Titans. Young Justice was an animated series that premiered on Cartoon Network on November 26, 2010. It followed a team of young DC Comics superheroes operating as a covert operations unit under the supervision of the Justice League. The show was critically acclaimed, beautifully animated, narratively ambitious, and beloved by a fan base that overlapped significantly with the fan base of the original Teen Titans. It ran for 2 seasons and 46 episodes before Cartoon Network declined to renew it for a 3rd season in early 2013. The timing was devastating, and the devastation was compounded by the specific nature of Young Justice's appeal. This was not a show that failed to find an audience. It was a show that found exactly the right audience and then was punished for it. Young Justice attracted older viewers, teenagers and young adults who appreciated its complex plotting, its mature themes, and its refusal to talk down to its audience. It attracted female viewers in significant numbers, a fact that became part of the controversy in ways that were both revealing and depressing. In December 2013, filmmaker Kevin Smith and television writer Paul Dini discussed the cancellation on Smith's podcast. And Dini made claims that network executives had expressed concern about the percentage of female viewers in the audience for shows like Young Justice. The implication was that female viewers were considered less valuable by the toy companies that funded the shows, because girls, according to the prevailing industry wisdom at the time, did not buy action figures. If the girls were watching but not buying, the logic went, then the female audience was a liability rather than an asset. Young Justice co-creator Greg Weisman later stated publicly that the female audience issue had zero impact on the show's cancellation. The show was canceled because of toy sales, full stop. But the damage was done. The narrative that the show had been canceled because girls watched it became part of the mythology. And that mythology made the replacement by Teen Titans Go feel even more offensive. The network had not just replaced a serious show with a silly one. It had, in the fan narrative, replaced a show that respected its audience with a show that did not. A show that girls liked with a show that treated its characters as punchlines. A show that trusted its viewers with a show that trusted only their attention spans. Young Justice's cancellation was announced in the same period that Teen Titans Go's premiere was being promoted. To the fans of Young Justice, the message was clear, even if it was not entirely accurate. The network canceled a serious, well-written, action-driven superhero show and replaced it with a silly, slapstick comedy starring characters from a different serious show that the network had also canceled. The cancellation felt like a pattern, the premiere felt like a punishment. The actual reasons for Young Justice's cancellation were more complicated than the narrative that fans constructed. The show's toy line, produced by Mattel, had underperformed. The action figures were not selling at the volume that Mattel needed to justify continuing its licensing deal with Warner Bros. Animation. Without the toy revenue to offset the show's production costs, which were significantly higher than those of a simpler comedy like Teen Titans Go, the economics of a 3rd season did not work. The decision was financial, not creative. Nobody at Cartoon Network sat in a room and decided that Young Justice was too good for their network. They sat in a room and looked at spreadsheets, and the spreadsheet said the show was not generating enough ancillary revenue to justify its budget. But fans do not think in spreadsheets. Fans think in stories, and the story they told themselves was simple and damning. The network killed a show we loved and replaced it with a show we hate. The Save Young Justice hashtag campaign, which launched in the aftermath of the cancellation announcement, became one of the largest fan mobilization efforts in the history of animated television. Tens of thousands of tweets, petitions with hundreds of thousands of signatures, an organized effort to contact network executives, advertisers, and Warner Bros. Corporate leadership. The fan campaign's organizational sophistication was remarkable for its time. In 2013, the tools for organizing large-scale fan campaigns were still relatively primitive compared to what would be available a decade later. There was no Discord, Twitter was only 7 years old, Reddit existed but had not yet become the dominant platform for fan community discussion. Despite these limitations, the Save Young Justice campaign achieved a level of coordination and persistence that impressed even the industry professionals who were its target. Fans organized letter-writing campaigns targeted at specific network executives. They pooled resources to buy advertising space on websites frequented by entertainment industry decision-makers. They compiled viewership data and demographic analyses and presented them to the network as evidence that the show's audience was larger and more dedicated than the ratings suggested. The campaign was also notable for its tone. Unlike many fan campaigns, which devolve into harassment and personal attacks, the Save Young Justice movement maintained a largely civil and constructive approach. The organizers understood that insulting the people they were trying to persuade was counterproductive. They made their case with data, with passion, and with a consistent message. This show has an audience that loves it, and that audience is willing to support it in whatever way the network requires. The campaign eventually succeeded, in a way. Young Justice was revived for a third season on DC Universe, the streaming platform that launched in 2018, and later moved to HBO Max for a fourth season. But the revival came 5 years after the cancellation, and by the time it arrived, the narrative had calcified. Teen Titans Go was the show that killed Young Justice. It did not matter that the claim was not technically true, it felt true. And in the economy of fan communities, feeling true is often more powerful than being true. The Young Justice revival, when it finally arrived, also complicated the narrative in unexpected ways. The third season, titled Young Justice Outsiders, premiered on DC Universe on January 4th, 2019, nearly 6 years after the show's cancellation. The season was well received by fans but did not achieve the cultural impact of the original 2 seasons. The fan base had aged. The platform it aired on was new and unfamiliar. The show's moment, the specific cultural window during which Young Justice had been the right show at the right time, had passed. The revival proved that the fans' campaign had been successful in getting the show renewed. It also proved that renewal is not the same as resurrection. A show can come back without truly coming back, the same way a person can revisit a place they used to live and find that the place is the same, but they are different. The relationship between Young Justice's revival and Teen Titans Go's continued success created an irony that both fan communities recognized. The show that was canceled because of toy sales, that was mourned by a devoted community, that was brought back through one of the most impressive fan campaigns in animation history, struggled to find its footing on a new platform. The show that replaced it, that was built specifically for the commercial reality that killed its predecessor, thrived. The market had spoken. The market preferred Teen Titans Go, and the market's preference, regardless of whether it reflected quality or merely commercial efficiency, was the final word in a conversation that the fans had been trying to have for 6 years. The Young Justice scandal added a second layer of resentment to the foundation that the replacement scandal had already built. Now, Teen Titans Go was not just the show that replaced the original Teen Titans. It was also the show that replaced Young Justice. 2 beloved series, both canceled, both replaced by the same goofy comedy. The pattern was undeniable, even if the causation was more complex than the pattern suggested. And the scheduling made it worse. When Teen Titans Go premiered, it took the time slot that Young Justice had occupied. The same channel, the same hour, the same day of the week. A viewer who turned on Cartoon Network at the time they had been watching Young Justice would now see Teen Titans Go. The substitution was not just conceptual. It was literal. You pressed the same button on your remote at the same time on the same day, and the show you loved was gone and the show you resented was in its place. The Young Justice scandal also introduced a dynamic that would define the next decade of Teen Titans Go's public life. The show became a symbol, not just of its own creative choices, but of a larger trend in children's entertainment that many viewers found disturbing. The replacement of complex, ambitious, narratively rich programming with simpler, cheaper, more commercially efficient alternatives. Teen Titans Go did not create this trend. The trend was driven by forces far larger than any single show, by changes in advertising markets, by the rise of streaming, by the fragmentation of the children's television audience across dozens of platforms. But Teen Titans Go was the face of the trend, the most visible example of what the trend produced. And the anger that the trend generated was focused, with laser precision, on the show that happened to be standing in the spotlight. This is the burden that Teen Titans Go has carried since 2013. It is not just responsible for its own creative choices. It is held responsible for the creative choices of an entire industry. When a viewer looks at Teen Titans Go and sees the death of ambitious children's animation, they are not wrong about the death. They are just wrong about the cause. The show is a symptom, not a disease. But symptoms are visible and diseases are not, and people treat what they can see. The third scandal is about real estate. In the most literal sense, it is about how much space Teen Titans Go occupied on Cartoon Network's schedule, and how that occupation became for many viewers the symbol of everything they believed was wrong with the network's direction. By 2014, Teen Titans Go was airing 6 times a day on weekdays. The show had been on the air for barely a year. It had produced fewer than 30 half-hour episodes, and yet the network was running each episode multiple times a day, filling hours of programming with reruns of a show that did not yet have enough episodes to sustain the volume of airtime it was receiving. By 2015, the number had climbed to 15 airings per day. 15. On some days, Teen Titans Go occupied more than half of Cartoon Network's entire broadcast schedule. The network that had once been home to a diverse slate of animated programming, a network that had aired Dexter's Laboratory, The Powerpuff Girls, Samurai Jack, Ed, Edd and Eddy, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, and dozens of other shows with distinct identities and creative visions, was now, on certain days, essentially a single-show network. The oversaturation reached its peak in 2017, when Cartoon Network ran what fans and critics described as wall-to-wall Teen Titans Go marathons. Entire days of programming consisted of nothing but Teen Titans Go episodes, run back-to-back, hour after hour, from morning to evening. Other shows on the network, including Steven Universe, Adventure Time, and The Amazing World of Gumball, shows that had their own devoted fan bases and critical acclaim, were squeezed into smaller and smaller windows of airtime. The scheduling strategy was not unique to Teen Titans Go, but the scale of the saturation was. Other networks had favored their top-rated shows before. Nickelodeon had aired SpongeBob SquarePants with similar frequency during the show's peak years. Disney Channel had built blocks of programming around its most popular live-action comedies. But the degree to which Cartoon Network concentrated its schedule around a single show in 2016 and 2017 was, according to schedule trackers and fan-compiled data, historically unprecedented for the network. In August 2017, fans documented a stretch of programming in which Teen Titans Go occupied every single slot on Cartoon Network's daytime schedule from 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening. 12 consecutive hours of a single show. The schedule trackers who had been monitoring Cartoon Network's programming decisions since the mid-2000s could not find a precedent. No show in the network's history, not the Powerpuff Girls, not Johnny Bravo, not any of the shows that had been Cartoon Network's flagship programs at various points in the network's existence, had ever been given this much airtime. The economic logic was, as always, defensible. Teen Titans Go was cheap to air, cheap to promote, and reliably popular with the demographic that advertisers wanted to reach. Every hour of Teen Titans Go reruns generated more advertising revenue per dollar of programming cost than virtually any other show on the network. From a purely financial perspective, the all-day marathons were the optimal scheduling strategy. They maximized revenue while minimizing cost. But television is not, or at least should not be, a purely financial endeavor. A network has obligations that extend beyond its quarterly earnings report. It has an obligation to its audience to provide a diverse programming slate. It has an obligation to its creative community to support a variety of voices and visions. It has an obligation to the medium itself to maintain the ecosystem of creativity that produces the hits in the first place. A network that airs 12 hours of the same show is not meeting any of those obligations. It is strip mining its own programming for short-term revenue, and the long-term cost of that strip mining is a creative landscape that has been flattened into a monoculture. The oversaturation also had a measurable impact on the shows that lost airtime. Steven Universe, which was in the middle of its most creatively ambitious arc during this period, saw its scheduling become increasingly erratic. New episodes would air with minimal promotion, sandwiched between blocks of Teen Titans Go reruns, and then disappear from the schedule for weeks or months. Adventure Time, which was approaching its series finale, received similar treatment. The Amazing World of Gumball, which was consistently well-reviewed and popular with older viewers, found its airtime cut to make room for more reruns of a show that had already aired hundreds of times. The fans of these shows did not blame Teen Titans Go's creators. They blamed the network, but the distinction between the show and the network was, for many viewers, irrelevant. The show was the thing on screen. The show was the thing that appeared when they turned on the channel. The show was the face of the network's decisions. And the face became the target. Networks have always favored their highest-rated shows in scheduling decisions. And Teen Titans Go was, by a significant margin, Cartoon Network's highest-rated program among its target demographic. The decision to air the show more frequently was a rational response to its ratings performance. More airings meant more opportunities for viewers to see the show, which meant more opportunities for advertisers to reach those viewers, which meant more revenue. The logic was sound, but the logic was invisible to the viewer who turned on Cartoon Network at 2 in the afternoon hoping to see anything other than Teen Titans Go and found nothing but Teen Titans Go. The oversaturation transformed the show from a program that some people disliked into a symbol of creative homogeneity. It was not just a show anymore, it was the evidence, visible on screen for hours every day, that the network had made a choice about what kind of content it valued, and that choice excluded everything that was not Teen Titans Go. The network even marketed the oversaturation with a promotional campaign built around the slogan, "Your new favorite show." The campaign appeared in 2015, and the irony was not lost on the viewers who had watched their actual favorite shows lose airtime to make room for more Teen Titans Go reruns. The slogan felt less like an invitation and more like a declaration. Not a suggestion that you might enjoy this show, but an announcement that this show was all you were going to get. The backlash to the scheduling was intense and sustained. Fans of other Cartoon Network shows organized campaigns to protest the oversaturation, online forums filled with complaints about the lack of programming diversity, YouTube videos documenting the schedule, with side-by-side comparisons showing how much airtime Teen Titans Go received versus how much airtime every other show on the network received combined, went viral. The word oversaturation became permanently associated with the show in a way that no amount of good episodes could undo. And the scheduling controversy had a secondary effect that is harder to measure but may have been more damaging in the long run. It turned viewers who were neutral about Teen Titans Go into viewers who actively resented it. A person who had no opinion about the show, who neither loved it nor hated it, who simply wanted to watch something else on Cartoon Network, was forced to encounter it so frequently that the encounter itself became an irritant. The show was everywhere. It was inescapable, and inescapability breeds contempt. The contempt was not abstract, it was specific and measurable. During the peak of the oversaturation controversy, ratings for Teen Titans Go actually declined on a per-episode basis. The show was being aired more often, but each individual airing was drawing fewer viewers than it had when the show was scheduled more sparingly. The network was diluting its own product. By making the show available at all times, it had removed the scarcity that makes any piece of content feel valuable. Why watch Teen Titans Go at 3 in the afternoon when you know it will be on again at 4 and at 5 and at 6? The urgency of watching was eliminated by the certainty that the show would always be there. The scheduling also affected the show's critical reputation in ways that had nothing to do with the show's actual quality. When a show airs once a week, each episode is an event. The audience anticipates it. They discuss it, they engage with it as a discrete piece of content. With its own identity, when a show airs 15 times a day, the individual episodes blur together. The show becomes wallpaper, a constant background presence that the viewer registers without really watching. The episodes that might have stood out as particularly clever, particularly funny, particularly inventive were buried in the repetition. The show's best work was invisible. And the network's decision to brand the oversaturation with the Your New Favorite Show campaign added a layer of perceived mockery that the network almost certainly did not intend. The slogan was designed to be playful, a tongue-in-cheek acknowledgement that the show was getting a lot of airtime. But to the viewers who were already frustrated, the slogan read as a taunt. Your favorite show is gone. This is what you get instead, and you will learn to like it because there is nothing else. The oversaturation era produced one additional effect that deserves attention before we move on, because it shaped how every subsequent scandal was received. It created a population of viewers who were primed for outrage. The experience of turning on Cartoon Network day after day and seeing nothing but Teen Titans Go had trained a generation of viewers to associate the show with frustration, with exclusion, with the feeling of being ignored by a network that was supposed to serve them. These viewers were not neutral observers. They were people with histories, with investments, with memories of shows they had loved and lost. The oversaturation was not happening in a vacuum. It was happening to people who had already been through the replacement scandal and the Young Justice cancellation. People who were carrying accumulated frustrations that predated the scheduling controversy by years. When those people encountered the meta episodes, the episodes that addressed their criticism directly, they were not reacting to the episodes alone. They were reacting to the episodes in the context of everything that had come before. The cancellations, the scheduling, the marketing slogans, the feeling of being ignored and then mocked for caring. This context is essential for understanding why the meta episodes generated the intensity of response that they did. A show that acknowledges criticism in the first episode of its run is having a conversation. A show that acknowledges criticism after 2 years of oversaturation, after replacing 2 beloved shows, after becoming the symbol of everything that fans believe is wrong with modern children's television, is doing something different. It is responding to a siege. And the people on the other side of the siege wall are not going to hear the response as a conversation. They are going to hear it as a taunt. They were people who had been subjected to months or years of scheduling decisions that felt personally antagonistic. And when the show began producing episodes that addressed criticism directly, those viewers were already at a rolling boil. The episodes that followed, the episodes that openly engaged with the controversy, did not create the anger. They channeled anger that already existed. They gave form to a frustration that the scheduling had been building for years. That distinction matters because it changes how you interpret the show's provocative episodes. The episodes were not provocations launched into a calm sea. They were provocations launched into a storm, and the storm was not of the show's making. The storm was the network's creation, produced by scheduling decisions that had nothing to do with the show's creative team. The show inherited the storm, and then, in a move that was either courageous or foolish, or both, decided to sail directly into it. The fourth scandal is about a specific episode, and it is the one where Teen Titans Go stopped pretending that it did not know people were angry and started making the anger part of the show. The episode is called Let's Get Serious. It is the 31st episode of the second season, and it aired on February 19th, 2015. The premise is simple. The Young Justice team, or a thinly veiled version of them, shows up in Jump City and confronts the Teen Titans about their lack of seriousness. The visiting heroes tell the Titans that their slapstick approach to crime fighting is embarrassing, that real heroes take their responsibilities seriously, that the world needs protectors who are willing to treat danger as dangerous. The Titans, chastened, attempt to become serious. They lower their voices, they furrow their brows, they adopt poses that are meant to convey gravity and determination. Robin, in particular, throws himself into the transformation with the obsessive intensity that defines his character. He studies what serious heroes look like. He practices brooding. He stands on rooftops in the rain, staring at the city below with an expression that is meant to communicate torment, but that reads, in the context of the show's visual style, as constipation. The comedy of the attempted transformation is sharp and well observed. The show is pointing out something genuine about the performative aspects of grim, dark superhero storytelling. The poses, the speeches, the dramatic lighting, these are conventions that audiences have been trained to associate with seriousness, but they are also conventions that can be parodied because they are, at some level, absurd. A person standing on a rooftop in the rain is not inherently more serious than a person eating pizza on a couch. The seriousness is a costume, and costumes can be worn by anyone, even characters who were designed for comedy. The episode's animation style shifts to match the tone, becoming darker, more angular, more reminiscent of the original Teen Titans and Young Justice. They adopt the visual style of a more dramatic show. They speak in deeper voices. They approach a routine crime with the gravitas and intensity of a military operation. The episode's animation style shifts to match the tone, becoming darker, more angular, more reminiscent of the original Teen Titans and Young Justice. And then, the episode reveals the joke. The serious approach does not work. The Titans are terrible at being serious. Their attempts at drama are awkward, forced, and counterproductive. They cannot sustain the tone. They cannot maintain the intensity. The episode argues, fundamentally unsuited to the kind of storytelling that the fans of the original series and Young Justice have been demanding. And the episode concludes by returning to the show's default mode. Cheerful, silly, unapologetic. As if to say, this is what we are, this is what we have always been, and your desire for something different does not change that. The episode also functions as a time capsule of a very specific moment in American animation history. In February 2015, when Let's Get Serious aired, the landscape of children's television was in the middle of a transformation that would reshape the industry for the next decade. Streaming services were beginning to commission their own animated content. Netflix had just released its first original animated series. Amazon was experimenting with animated pilots. The traditional networks, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, and Disney Channel, were watching their monopoly on children's entertainment erode in real time. In this environment, the question of what kind of shows children's networks should produce was not just an artistic question. It was a survival question. Should the networks invest in ambitious, expensive, serialized shows that might attract older viewers and critical acclaim, but that required significant investment and carried significant risk? Or should they invest in cheaper, simpler, more commercially reliable shows that guaranteed a baseline audience and a steady stream of advertising revenue? Teen Titans Go was Cartoon Network's answer to that question, And Let's Get Serious was the show's answer to the people who disagreed with the answer. The episode is not just a response to fan criticism. It is a defense of a business model. It is saying, silly shows have value, they have an audience, they make money, and the demand for seriousness is at least in part a demand for a kind of television that the market may no longer support. That reading makes the episode feel less like an attack and more like a eulogy. The show is not celebrating the decline of serious animation. It is acknowledging it. It is saying, this is where we are now, this is what the industry produces. And this is what we, as a show that exists within this industry, are able to be. The fan reaction was volcanic. Critics of the show interpreted Let's Get Serious as a direct attack on the audience that had been asking for a more serious Teen Titans. The episode seemed to be saying, explicitly and without remorse, that the fans who wanted the original show back were wrong to want it, that their preferences were invalid, that the show they loved was inferior to the show they hated, and that the show they hated knew it and did not care. The episode is, by any reasonable reading, a response to criticism. It takes the most common complaint about Teen Titans Go, that it is not serious enough, and turns it into a plot, and the plot's resolution is that seriousness is not what these characters are for. The show is not apologizing, it is not compromising, it is not meeting its critics halfway. It is telling them, in the clearest possible terms, that their criticism has been heard, considered, and rejected. What made Let's Get Serious particularly inflammatory was its use of Young Justice as the vehicle for the criticism. By having the serious heroes be recognizable versions of Young Justice characters, the show was not just responding to generic complaints about tone, it was responding to the specific community that had blamed Teen Titans Go for Young Justice's cancellation. The message was layered. We know you think we replaced your show. We know you think your show was better. Here is an episode where we agree that your show was serious and ours is not, and here is the punchline. We think that is fine. The episode crystallized something that had been building since the show's premiere. Teen Titans Go was not a show that happened to be different from what fans wanted. It was a show that was aware of what fans wanted, that acknowledged the desire publicly, and that chose to do something else anyway. The awareness made the choice feel deliberate, and deliberate choices are harder to forgive than accidental ones. But there is another way to read Let's Get Serious, a reading that the show's defenders have advanced consistently, and that has some merit. The episode is not an attack on the fans. It is a defensive comedy. It is saying that a show does not have to be serious to have value, that silliness is its own kind of art, that the demand for seriousness is itself a kind of snobbery that devalues the work of making people laugh. The Titans' failure at being serious is not presented as a character flaw. It is presented as a character trait, a defining quality that makes them who they are. The episode is saying, we are not your show. We are our show. And our show is worth being. The defenders of the episode also pointed to a detail that the critics often overlooked. Let's Get Serious does not portray the serious approach as worthless. It portrays it as ill-suited to these specific characters. The episode is not arguing that serious superhero shows are bad. It is arguing that these Titans, as they exist in this version of the story, cannot be serious heroes. Their DNA has been written for comedy. Their world has been built for comedy. Forcing them into a dramatic framework is like forcing a cat into a tuxedo. The cat is still a cat. The tuxedo does not change the animal underneath. This reading is more generous than the critics allowed, but it still does not fully resolve the tension. Because the episode exists in a world where the original Teen Titans proved that these exact characters, with these exact names and these exact relationships, could sustain a dramatic framework. The original show was the proof that seriousness worked for these characters. Let's Get Serious is arguing against evidence that the audience has already seen with their own eyes. The Titans can be serious. They were serious for 65 episodes and a movie. The fact that Teen Titans Go's versions of the characters cannot be serious is a choice the current show made, not an inherent limitation of the characters themselves. And the episode's timing made the message feel less like art and more like a strategic maneuver. Let's Get Serious aired during a period when Cartoon Network was aggressively expanding Teen Titans Go's presence on the schedule at the expense of other shows. The fans who watched the episode were not just people who missed the original Teen Titans. They were people who were watching their current favorite shows lose airtime to make room for more Teen Titans Go. Telling those fans that silliness is valid felt less like a philosophical position and more like a justification for a business decision that was already affecting them. The problem is that both readings are correct simultaneously. The episode is defending comedy and attacking the audience. It is affirming the show's identity and dismissing the audience's preferences. It is both a creative statement and a provocation, and the line between the two is so thin that it barely exists. And that thin line is where the scandal lives, in the space between self-expression and contempt, between artistic confidence and audience hostility, between saying this is who we are and saying you are wrong for wanting something else. The fifth scandal is the one that people remember most, and it is the meanest thing the show has ever done to the people who loved the original. The Return of Slade is the 50th episode of the second season. It aired on September 24th, 2015, and the title alone was an event. Slade, the name that fans of the original Teen Titans had been waiting to hear for 12 years. The villain whose presence had given the 2003 series its dramatic center, whose relationship with Robin had produced some of the most compelling animated television of the decade, whose unresolved fate at the end of the original series had fueled fan theories and speculation for nearly a decade. Slade was coming back. The episode opens with the Titans returning to the tower after what they describe as the most epic, dramatic, emotionally satisfying battle they have ever experienced. They are bruised and exhausted and exhilarated. They talk about the fight in rapturous detail. They describe the moment where all 5 of their individual storylines converged into a single climactic confrontation. They describe the animation, which they say was stunning. They describe the emotional stakes, which they say were unlike anything the show had ever attempted. They describe the moment where Robin faced Slade alone, one-on-one, and everything that had been building since the show's first episode paid off in a sequence that was equal parts action, drama, and catharsis. The audience does not see any of it. Not a single frame. The entire battle with Slade happens off-screen, during a cold open that the episode skips past with a time card. By the time the viewer joins the Titans in the tower, the epic battle is already over. The story the audience came to see, the story the title promised, the story that the marketing had been building toward, has already been told to the characters but not to the viewers. And then, the episode becomes about a clown. A literal clown who arrives at the tower and starts performing for the Titans. The clown does not have a name that matters. He does not have a backstory that matters. He is a clown performing clown things, honking a horn, making balloon animals, tripping over his own feet, doing the things that clowns have done since the concept of the clown was invented. The Titans enjoy the clown, they laugh at his jokes, they participate in his tricks, they treat the clown with the same enthusiasm and engagement that the audience expected them to bring to their battle with Slade. The emotional energy that should have been directed at the show's most iconic villain is instead directed at a performer in a red nose, and the mismatch between the expectation and the delivery is so extreme, so aggressive, so deliberate, that the episode cannot be read as anything other than a commentary on the difference between what the audience wants and what the show is willing to give. The rest of the 11 minutes is devoted to the Titans' interactions with this clown, a literal clown, who arrives at the tower and starts performing for the Titans. The rest of the 11 minutes is devoted to the Titans' interactions with this clown, who is not Slade, who has no connection to Slade, who is the deliberate antithesis of everything Slade represents. The episode uses Slade's name to get the audience to press play, and then gives them a clown instead. The backlash was immediate and overwhelming. Fans called it false advertising. They called it a betrayal. They called it the most disrespectful thing a show had ever done to its own audience. The episode's IMDb rating, 3.1 out of 10, remains one of the lowest in the show's entire run. Comment sections and fan forums erupted with accusations that the show's creators had deliberately weaponized nostalgia, using the name of a beloved character as clickbait to lure viewers into an episode that existed for no purpose other than to mock them for caring. And the accusation was not entirely wrong. The Return of Slade is structured as a prank. It uses the audience's desire against them. It knows what the viewer came for, and it withholds it. And the withholding is the joke. The episode is saying, you wanted Slade, and we know you wanted Slade, and here is a clown instead. The cruelty is the comedy. But the episode is also saying something more complicated than pure mockery. The clown in the show's framing represents what Teen Titans Go actually is, a performance designed to entertain children. The Titans' enthusiasm for the clown is genuine. They enjoy the silliness. They are not pretending to like the clown to mock the audience. They actually like it. The episode is not saying that the audience is wrong for wanting Slade. It is saying that this show is the clown. And the clown is what this show is designed to deliver. And the expectation of Slade was never realistic because this was never the kind of show that could contain a character like Slade. The distinction matters, but it did not save the episode from its reputation. The Return of Slade became the defining example of Teen Titans Go's contentious relationship with the fans of the original series. It was cited in virtually every article, video, essay, and forum discussion about the show's controversies. It became shorthand for everything the show's critics hated about it: the perceived arrogance, the willingness to provoke, the refusal to give the audience what it wanted, even when giving them what they wanted would have been the easier path. And there is one more layer to the scandal that rarely gets discussed. The episode describes Through the Titans dialogue, the episode that the audience wanted to see. They describe it in detail, they describe the animation, the pacing, the emotional beats, the narrative structure. They describe an episode of television that sounds, from their description, genuinely great. The show knows what a good Slade episode looks like. The show can describe one in enough detail to make it feel real. The show chose not to make it. The episode also raised a question about the show's responsibilities to its own title. When you call an episode The Return of Slade, you are making a promise. The title is a contract between the show and its audience. The audience selects the episode based on the title. They invest their time based on the promise the title makes. And when the show fails to deliver on that promise, when the title turns out to be a deliberate misdirection, the failure is not just creative. It is ethical. The show lied about what it was selling. The product did not match the label. In any other industry, that would be called false advertising. In television, it is called a creative choice, and the distinction between the two depends entirely on how much goodwill the audience has left to spend. By September 2015, the audience's goodwill was nearly depleted. The oversaturation of the Cartoon Network schedule had exhausted the patience of fans who were already predisposed to dislike the show. Let's Get Serious had alienated the fans who had been hoping for a dialogue between the show and its critics. And now The Return of Slade had taken the last thing the fans were holding on to: the hope that the show might eventually engage with its predecessor's legacy in a meaningful way, and turned it into a joke about a clown. The cumulative effect of these 3 episodes, airing within a span of 7 months, was to transform the show's relationship with its critics from a disagreement into an antagonism. Before these episodes, the fans' complaint was that Teen Titans Go was not the show they wanted. After these episodes, the complaint was that Teen Titans Go was actively hostile to the audience that wanted something different. The shift was significant. You can coexist with a show that disappoints you. It is much harder to coexist with a show that seems to enjoy your disappointment. The Return of Slade also had a lasting impact on how fans approach the show going forward. Before the episode, there was still a contingent of original series fans who held out hope that Teen Titans Go might eventually mature, might eventually incorporate some of the elements that made the original beloved, might eventually find a way to bridge the gap between the comedy it was and the drama it replaced. The Return of Slade killed that hope. It was not a gradual disillusionment. It was a single, definitive moment where the show told its potential converts that conversion was not on the table. The episode became a line in the sand. Before it, the relationship between the show and the fans of the original was contentious but not entirely hostile. There was still space for engagement, for dialogue, for the possibility that the two camps might find some common ground. After it, the space collapsed. The fans of the original, who had been willing to give Teen Titans Go a chance, stopped giving it chances. The viewers who had been watching out of obligation, out of loyalty to the characters, if not the show, stopped watching. The episode did not just alienate critics. It actively drove away potential viewers, people who might have eventually warmed to the show if the show had given them any reason to. And the loss of those potential viewers, which is impossible to quantify but almost certainly real, is the hidden cost of the show's confrontational approach to its critics. Every provocative episode is a short-term ratings event and a long-term audience reduction. The controversy generates attention, and attention generates viewership. But the viewership it generates is temporary, and the viewers it alienates are permanent. The people who left after the Return of Slade are not coming back. The show spent their goodwill on a clown joke, and goodwill, once spent, does not regenerate. That choice is the scandal. Not the clown, not the bait and switch, the choice. The show demonstrated that it understood what the audience wanted, that it was capable of imagining what the audience wanted, and that it had decided deliberately and with full awareness not to provide it. The audience was not denied Slade because the show could not handle Slade. They were denied Slade because the show decided that denying them was funnier than delivering. The Return of Slade marked the end of one phase of the show's relationship with its audience and the beginning of another. In the first phase, from 2013 to mid-2015, the conflict was primarily between the fans and the network. The fans blamed Cartoon Network for canceling the original, for oversaturating the schedule, for refusing to listen. The show itself was collateral damage, the object that happened to be in the blast radius. After the Return of Slade, the conflict shifted. Now the fans blamed the show itself. The show had spoken. It had taken a position. and the choice was the clown. The shift from blaming the network to blaming the show changed the character of the controversy in subtle but important ways. You can forgive a network. Networks are faceless. Networks make decisions based on spreadsheets. Networks do not have intentions in the way that creative works have intentions. But a show is a creative work, made by people expressing choices. And when the choices feel hostile, the hostility becomes personal. The fans were no longer angry at a business decision, they were angry at an artistic choice. And artistic anger is deeper and more durable than commercial anger, because it touches identity rather than convenience. You can switch networks, you cannot switch the show that made you feel disrespected. The sixth scandal is about gender, and it is the one that made people ask whether Teen Titans Go's willingness to provoke had crossed a line from irreverent into irresponsible. Boys vs. Girls is the 20th episode of the second season. It aired on November 6, 2014. The premise is a competition between the male Titans, Robin, Cyborg, and Beast Boy, and the female Titans, Starfire and Raven, to determine which gender is superior. Robin, who initiates the contest, declares that girls cannot compete with boys because girls are too busy lying around thinking about their looks and being emotional. The line is delivered by a character who is established within the show as arrogant, delusional, and wrong about virtually everything. Robin's sexism is not presented as the show's position. It is presented as Robin's position, and Robin is a character whose positions are reliably incorrect. The episode resolves by having the girls win every round of the competition effortlessly. The boys lose, the boys accept their loss. The episode's conclusion is on its surface a straightforward rejection of sexism. Girls are better, boys were wrong, the end. But the execution was more complicated than the conclusion suggested, and the reaction was divided in ways that revealed something about how different audiences process satire. One group of viewers saw the episode as sexist against girls. They argued that reducing gender equality to a competition, even one that the girls win, trivializes the actual complexity of gender dynamics. They pointed out that framing gender as a contest implies that one gender must be superior to the other, which is itself a sexist framework regardless of which side wins. And they noted that having Robin articulate the sexist position in detail, even as a character who is wrong, gives the position more airtime and more narrative weight than it deserves. Another group of viewers saw the episode as sexist against boys. They argued that the episode's resolution, in which boys lose every round and are portrayed as objectively inferior, sends a message that masculinity is inherently less valuable than femininity. They pointed out that reversing the direction of a sexist claim does not make it less sexist, it just changes the target. A third group saw the episode as a clumsy attempt at satire that failed because the show's format is not capable of handling topics this complex. 11 minutes is not enough time to explore gender dynamics with nuance. The episode reduces a genuinely complicated social issue to a series of physical contests, strips away all context and subtlety, and delivers a resolution that feels more like a slogan than an insight. The original Teen Titans handled gender with significantly more sophistication. Starfire and Raven were powerful, complex, fully realized characters whose strength was never defined in opposition to the male characters. They did not need to win a competition to prove their value. Their value was demonstrated through their actions, their decisions, their growth across 5 seasons. The show never needed an episode about whether girls were as good as boys, because the show's entire existence answered the question without asking it. The episode also drew criticism for the way it positioned the competition. The contests that the boys and girls participate in are physical, fights, challenges, tests of strength and skill. By framing the gender debate as a series of physical contests, the episode implicitly argued that the question of which gender is better can be answered by determining which gender is stronger. This is, to put it mildly, a reductive framework. Gender equality is not about physical superiority. It is about equity, about representation, about the dismantling of systems that privilege one group at the expense of another. Reducing it to a fistfight is not just simplistic. It is the kind of simplification that actually reinforces the stereotypes it claims to challenge, because it accepts the premise that gender is a competition, which is precisely the premise that gender equality seeks to reject. The show's defenders argued that expecting nuance from an 11-minute children's comedy is itself unreasonable. The episode is for kids. Kids understand competition. Kids understand winning and losing. The episode uses a framework that children can follow to deliver a message that girls are capable and strong. The sophistication of the framework matters less than the clarity of the message. And the message, the girls win, the boys are wrong, is clear. The defense has merit, but it collides with the show's own self-image. Teen Titans Go has never presented itself as just a children's comedy. It has presented itself as a smart children's comedy, a show that trusts its audience to understand satire, meta-commentary, fourth wall breaks, and cultural references that extend far beyond the typical boundaries of kids' programming. The show that can satirize the superhero film industry and parody the works of classical literature should be able to handle gender dynamics with more sophistication than Who Can Punch Harder. The episode does not fail because it is a kids' show. It fails because it is a smart kids' show that chose to be dumb about something important. Teen Titans Go's approach, by contrast, made the question explicit, turned it into a competition, and resolved it with a simplistic answer that satisfied almost nobody. The episode became a reference point in broader discussions about how children's media handles gender, and the reference was not flattering. Critics pointed to shows like Steven Universe, which had premiered the previous year and was already demonstrating that children's animation could engage with gender, identity, and equality in ways that were both accessible to young audiences and sophisticated enough to withstand adult scrutiny. Adventure Time, which was in the middle of its most ambitious narrative arc, was exploring gender and identity through characters like BMO, in ways that felt organic and thoughtful. The bar for how children's shows could handle sensitive topics was rising, and Boys vs. Girls did not clear it. The comparison to other Cartoon Network shows was particularly unflattering because those shows were airing on the same network, sometimes in the same programming block, during the same era. The network that was scheduling 12 hours of Teen Titans Go per day was also, in its remaining hours, airing shows that were handling complex topics with grace and nuance. The contrast made Teen Titans Go look not just simplistic, but lazy, as though the show had decided that its young audience did not deserve the same thoughtfulness that other shows on the same network were providing. The episode's intentions may have been good, its execution was at best inadequate and at worst counterproductive, turning a topic that deserves careful treatment into a punchline that made both sides feel disrespected. The Boys vs. Girls episode also established a pattern that would recur throughout the show's run, the pattern of touching a sensitive topic, generating controversy, and then moving on without ever revisiting the topic or addressing the controversies. The show does not learn from its controversies. It does not grow from them. It does not produce follow-up episodes that engage more thoughtfully with the issues that previous episodes handled clumsily. It simply drops the topic and moves on to the next thing, which might be a food fight, or a musical number, or a time travel parody. The show's relationship with controversy is transactional. It generates it, benefits from the attention, and then abandons it. This transactional relationship is, in some ways, the defining characteristic of Teen Titans Go's approach to everything. The show's treatment of controversy mirrors its treatment of continuity, its treatment of character development, its treatment of its own mythology. Nothing sticks, nothing accumulates, nothing carries forward. Each episode is a fresh start, and the fresh starts include fresh starts on the controversies that previous episodes generated. The show does not carry the weight of its own choices, which is why it can make the same kind of controversial choice again and again without ever seeming burdened by the consequences. But the audience carries the weight. The audience remembers what the show forgets, and the accumulated weight of 10 scandals across 13 years is heavy enough that it has permanently shaped how a significant portion of the animation community views not just Teen Titans Go, but Cartoon Network itself. The network's reputation, its identity as a home for creative and ambitious animation, was damaged during the Teen Titans Go era in ways that the network is still working to repair. And the show, for all its commercial success, cannot escape the fact that its success came at a cost to the ecosystem that made it possible. The 7th scandal happened inside the show's own architecture, in an episode that broke the wall between the characters and the audience, and then used the opening to deliver a message that the audience was not sure it wanted to hear. The Fourth Wall is the 9th episode of the 3rd season. It aired on October 20th, 2015, less than a month after the return of Slade. The episode's premise is that the Titans become aware that they are characters in a television show. They can see the viewers, they can hear the criticism, they know what people have been saying about them online. Beast Boy, in particular, addresses the audience directly. He calls them creeps for watching. The word creeps, specifically, landed with a force that the show's writers may not have anticipated. The people being called creeps were not anonymous trolls or faceless haters. They were teenagers and young adults who had grown up with the original series, who had spent years investing emotional energy in these characters, who had campaigned for the show's return, and who were now being told, by a character they had loved as children, that they were creepy for continuing to care. The accusation of creepiness carried a specific charge. It implied that the adult or teenage fans who watched a show designed for younger children were doing something inappropriate by watching. It implied that their continued attachment to the original series was not devotion, but obsession. Not loyalty, but dysfunction. The word reframed the power dynamic between the show and its audience. The fans were not consumers with legitimate preferences. They were intruders, outsiders peering into a space that was not designed for them and was not interested in accommodating them. Beast Boy then acknowledges every complaint that has been lodged against the show since its premiere. He acknowledges every complaint that has been lodged against the show since its premiere. The animation style, the humor, the lack of seriousness, the comparison to the original series, the perceived decline in quality, all of it, and then he announces that the show does not care, that the show is not going to change, that the criticism has been heard and dismissed, and that the dismissal, the episode lists the complaints with precision. It does not strawman them. It does not exaggerate them. It presents the actual criticisms that actual people have actually made, in their actual words, and then responds to each one with the same answer. We do not care. The show is what it is. The audience can take it or leave it. But the show is not going to become something different to make the audience happy. The fourth wall is, depending on your perspective, either the most honest episode Teen Titans Go has ever produced, or the most hostile. It is honest because it acknowledges the criticism directly, without pretending that the criticism does not exist. Most shows ignore their critics. Teen Titans Go put the criticism on screen, word for word, and responded to it in real time. That requires a kind of courage, or at least a kind of recklessness, that most television shows do not possess. But it is hostile because the response is not engagement. It is dismissal. The show does not argue with the criticism. It does not explain its creative choices. It does not offer a defense of its artistic vision. It simply says, "We heard you, and we do not care." And that dismissal, delivered through a character who is calling the audience creeps while he says it, transforms the episode from a creative statement into something that feels, to the people being dismissed, like an attack. The fourth wall also established Teen Titans Go as something unusual in the landscape of children's animation. A show that treats its own reception as a subject worthy of episodes. Most animated shows for children exist in a hermetically sealed narrative world. The characters do not know they are characters. The audience does not exist within the show's fiction. The fourth wall, in most children's programming, is not just unbroken. It is invisible. The audience is asked to pretend that the world on screen is real, and the show reciprocates by pretending that the audience is not there. Teen Titans Go broke that convention repeatedly, and the fourth wall was the most aggressive example. By acknowledging the audience, by addressing the criticism, by inserting the real-world controversy into the fictional narrative, the show blurred the line between entertainment and commentary in a way that no other children's show had attempted at that scale. The move was postmodern in the truest sense of the word. The show was about itself. Its subject was its own existence. Its plot was its own reception. And its resolution was the declaration that it would not change, which is itself a plot point, a character decision, a narrative choice with consequences. Whether the consequences were intended is another question. By declaring that it would not change, the show foreclosed certain possibilities. It committed to its own stubbornness. It told its audience, including the children in its target demographic who had no stake in the controversy, that flexibility is weakness, and that refusal is strength. That is a message. And messages have effects, especially on young audiences who are still forming their understanding of how creative people respond to criticism. The episode aired at a time when the controversy around Teen Titans Go was at its height. The oversaturation of the Cartoon Network schedule was at its peak. The return of Slade had aired weeks earlier. The fan campaigns against the show were louder than ever. And into that environment, the show released an episode that addressed every complaint and responded to all of them with a shrug. The episode also raises a question about the relationship between a creator and an audience that has become increasingly relevant in the age of social media. When does an audience's right to express dissatisfaction end and a creator's right to respond begin? The fans of the original Teen Titans had every right to say they did not like Teen Titans Go. They had every right to organize campaigns, write negative reviews, and use social media to express their disappointment. Those are the rights of any consumer of any product. But the show also had the right to respond. The creators of Teen Titans Go are artists, and artists have always responded to criticism, sometimes with grace, sometimes with anger, sometimes with art that incorporates the criticism as material. The fourth wall is not the first piece of art to address its own critics. Responding to criticism through art is a tradition as old as art itself. The question is not whether the show had the right to respond, the question is whether the response was proportionate, productive, or fair. And the answer to that question depends on which side of the fourth wall you are standing on. From inside the show, the response feels justified, even brave. The creators are standing up for their work, refusing to be bullied into changing their artistic vision, asserting that their show has value even if not everyone values it. From outside the show, the response feels dismissive, even cruel. The audience is being told by the characters they watch that their opinions do not matter. The fourth wall, combined with Let's Get Serious and the return of Slade, established a pattern that defined the show's relationship with its critics for the remainder of its run. The show was not just aware of the controversy, it was feeding on it. Each provocative episode generated more anger, which generated more discussion, which generated more attention, which generated more viewership, which generated more provocations. The cycle was self-sustaining, and the show had no incentive to break it. In fact, the show had every incentive to perpetuate it. Controversy generates coverage. Coverage generates awareness. Awareness generates viewership. And viewership is the currency that determines whether a show lives or dies in the television economy. Teen Titans Go's provocative episodes were not just creative expressions. They were marketing strategies, each one designed to generate the kind of conversation that conventional advertising cannot buy. The strategy was not new. Professional wrestling has been using a similar model for decades, deliberately provoking segments of its audience in order to generate the kind of passionate response that keeps people engaged. Reality television operates on the same principle. The controversial contestant, the shocking elimination, the manufactured conflict, these are not accidents. They are engineering, and Teen Titans Go applied the same engineering to animated children's television, a genre that had never before been subjected to this kind of deliberate audience provocation. The result was a show that existed in a state of permanent controversy, a show where the controversy was not a bug, but a feature, not a side effect, but a strategy, not a problem to be solved, but a resource to be mined. And the mining has been productive. The show has run for 9 seasons. It has produced over 400 episodes. It has survived every campaign against it, and the campaigns themselves, the petitions, and the hashtags and the angry videos have become part of the show's mythology, as inseparable from its identity as the characters and the jokes and the 11-minute format. The 8th scandal involves a child, and it is the one that made even some of the show's defenders uncomfortable. Wall-E T is the 33rd episode of the 3rd season. It aired on June 23, 2016. The episode was created as part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation's program, which grants wishes to children with serious medical conditions. A teenager from East Tennessee named William Walter Thompson, who was living with a rare genetic disorder called Burkitt syndrome, wished to become a voice actor. The Make-A-Wish Foundation arranged for William to record voice lines for a character based on himself, a character called Wall-E T, who would appear in an episode of Teen Titans Go, the show that William loved. The episode was produced, William recorded his lines, and then, according to reports that emerged after the episode aired, Cartoon Network decided not to use William's actual voice recordings in the final broadcast. The network's reasoning, as reported by fan communities and later confirmed through industry sources, was that William was not a member of the show's production crew, and network standards required that voice performances in broadcast episodes be delivered by professional voice actors. Tara Strong, one of the show's regular cast members who voices Raven, was brought in to re-record William's lines using automated dialogue replacement. William's performance was replaced. The character he inspired still appeared in the episode, but the voice coming out of that character's mouth was not his. The controversy erupted on 2 fronts. The first was about the decision to replace William's voice. Fans argued that the entire point of a Make-A-Wish experience is the fulfillment of the wish, and that William's wish was to be a voice actor, not to have a character named after him voiced by someone else. Replacing his performance with a professional actor's performance negated the wish. The gift had been offered and then retracted, and the retraction felt bureaucratic, cold, and unnecessary. The second front was about the episode's content. Wall-E T, as a character within the episode, serves a specific narrative function. He is a super fan of the show who was brought into the Titans world, and his presence becomes the vehicle for the show's continued commentary on its relationship with its audience. The episode uses a character inspired by a real child with a serious illness as part of its ongoing argument with its critics. The show's defenders argued that the episode was a tribute to William, that it celebrated his love for the show, that it gave him a permanent place in the show's mythology. The show's critics argued that using a Make-A-Wish child as a prop in the show's culture war with its audience was a line that should not have been crossed. The voice replacement issue also touched on a broader question about how the entertainment industry handles charitable partnerships. Make-A-Wish collaborations are common in Hollywood. Actors visit sick children. Musicians perform private concerts. Studios arrange set visits. These interactions are designed to bring joy to children in difficult circumstances, and they succeed at that purpose millions of times over. But they also serve a secondary function that is less discussed. They generate positive press for the studio, the show, and the network. A Make-A-Wish story is, by its nature, a good news story. It is a story about kindness and generosity and the power of entertainment to transcend suffering. When the Wall-E T controversy emerged, it transformed a good news story into a complicated one. The studio that had participated in the wish was now being accused of mishandling it. The show that had created a character to honor a sick child was now being accused of using that character as a shield against criticism. The network that had enabled the collaboration was now being accused of replacing the child's voice with a professional actor's voice for bureaucratic reasons. Every element of the story that was supposed to generate goodwill was now generating controversy, and the controversy was more persistent and more damaging than the goodwill had been beneficial. The episode's content compounded the problem. Within the 11-minute runtime, Wall-E T, the character, interacts with the Titans in ways that inevitably touch on the show's meta-narrative. The show has spent years commenting on its own criticism. It has built episodes around its relationship with its haters. And now it has created a character inspired by a real child and placed that character inside the same meta-narrative. The show may not have intended for Wall-E T to function as a response to critics, but the show's established pattern of responding to critics through its episodes made it impossible for the audience to read the episode outside of that pattern. The truth, as with most of the scandals on this list, sits in the uncomfortable space between both interpretations. The episode probably was made with genuine affection for William, and the episode probably did use his character in a way that served the show's meta-narrative about its critics. Both things could be true at the same time, and the fact that both things are true is what makes the scandal feel unresolvable. The voice replacement controversy also raised questions about Cartoon Network's internal policies and whether those policies were applied consistently. The network's stated reason for replacing William's voice, that he was not a member of the production crew, seemed to conflict with the spirit of the Make-A-Wish collaboration. The entire point of the wish was that William would get to do something that members of the production crew do. He would get to voice a character. The fact that the network's policies prevented his voice from being used in the final broadcast meant that the wish was fulfilled in the recording studio, but negated in the editing room. William had the experience. He did not get the result. The controversy was amplified by the way the episode was promoted. Cartoon Network used the Wall-E T episode in its marketing, highlighting the Make-A-Wish connection. The network promoted the episode as a feel-good story, a story about a sick child whose dream came true through the magic of animation. But the dream, as broadcast, was a different dream from the one William had actually dreamed. He had dreamed of hearing his own voice coming out of a cartoon character's mouth. What he got was hearing Tara Strong's voice coming out of a character that looked like him. The distinction may seem small. For a child whose wish was specifically about voice acting, it was not small at all. Tara Strong, for her part, handled the situation with grace. She did not seek credit for the replacement. She did not promote her involvement at the expense of William's story. By all accounts, she performed the re-recording as a professional obligation and expressed genuine warmth toward William and his experience with the show. The controversy was not about Tara Strong. It was about the system that required her involvement in the first place. William himself has spoken positively about the experience. He expressed gratitude for the opportunity, for the character, for the connection to a show he loved. His feelings are not ambiguous. He was happy, and his happiness matters. It matters more than the opinions of people who did not know him and were not involved in the production. But the controversy that surrounded the episode is separate from William's experience of it. The controversy is about what the show chose to do with the opportunity, how it handled the voice replacement, and what it means when a children's comedy uses a seriously ill child's wish as material for an episode that is, at least in part, about the show's relationship with the people who hate it. The Wall-E T controversy left a residue that affected how subsequent charitable collaborations involving animated shows were discussed and evaluated. In the years following the episode, fans and critics began paying closer attention to how networks handled Make-A-Wish and similar partnerships, whether the wishes were genuinely fulfilled or symbolically fulfilled, whether the children involved retained creative control over their contributions, and whether the resulting content was used in ways that served the child's interests or the show's interests. The episode did not change industry practice, but it changed the conversation about industry practice, and the change was permanent. And the conversation about Wall-E T connects to a broader conversation about how Teen Titans Go has used real people, real events, and real controversies as material for its episodes. The show exists in a strange space between fiction and commentary, between a cartoon and a cultural conversation. Its episodes reference real fan campaigns, real critical responses, real industry dynamics. It is a show that watches its own reception and then dramatizes what it sees. And the dramatization, by its nature, transforms real people's real feelings into fictional entertainment, a transformation that can feel, depending on your perspective, like art or like exploitation. The Ninth Scandal left the television screen entirely and entered the real world of box offices and broken promises. Teen Titans Go to the Movies premiered in theaters on July 27, 2018. It was the first theatrical film based on the show, produced by Warner Bros. Animation, with a budget of approximately $10 million. The film was a comedy about the Titans' desire to get their own superhero movie, a premise that allowed the show to satirize the superhero film industry, DC's own cinematic universe, and the cultural machinery of Hollywood franchise building. The film was, by most critical accounts, good. It received a 91% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics praised its humor, its self-awareness, its willingness to mock its own corporate parent, and its ability to function as both a kids' movie and a knowing commentary on the state of superhero cinema. Will Arnett voiced Slade, bringing a specific energy to the role that was tailor-made for the film's comedic approach. Arnett, best known for his work on Arrested Development and BoJack Horseman, brought a dryness and a self-awareness to the villain that distinguished movie Slade from every previous version of the character. This was not the menacing puppet master of the original series. This was a villain who was aware of his own villainy, who performed it with a wink, who understood that in a world of comedic superheroes, the villain's job is to be entertaining, not terrifying. The casting choice itself became part of the discussion about the film's relationship to the original series. Slade in the original Teen Titans was voiced by Ron Perlman, an actor whose deep, gravelly voice gave the character a physical presence that made him feel genuinely dangerous even in animated form. Perlman's Slade was a weight. Arnett's Slade was a balloon, colorful and buoyant and designed to pop for laughs. The change in voice reflected the change in the character, which reflected the change in the show, which reflected the change in the industry. Everything had gotten lighter, everything had gotten funnier. And the fans who remembered Perlman's Slade, who remembered feeling genuinely scared of an animated villain, who remembered what it felt like when a children's show treated danger as dangerous, noticed the change and mourned it. His performance was widely praised as a highlight, who served as the film's primary antagonist, and his performance was widely praised as a highlight. The box office told a different story, and the story had layers that the simple numbers did not capture. The film opened on July 27, 2018, the same weekend as Mission Impossible Fallout, a franchise blockbuster that dominated the box office with a $77 million domestic opening. The competition was formidable, but the $10.5 million opening was below even the most conservative projections for the film. Warner Bros. Had hoped for an opening closer to 15 or 20 million, a number that would have signaled a viable theatrical franchise and justified the investment in further Teen Titans Go feature films. The underperformance sparked a debate that has continued for years. Why did the film underperform? The critical response was strong. The reviews were among the best of any animated film released that year. The 91% rating on Rotten Tomatoes placed it alongside the Pixar and Disney releases that typically dominate the animated film landscape. The film was by every critical measure a success. The audience simply did not show up. Several theories emerged. The most popular, and the one that fans of the original series embraced most enthusiastically, was that the film's association with Teen Titans Go had driven away older viewers who might otherwise have attended. The original series' fanbase, which overlapped significantly with the demographic that drives animated film attendance, had spent 5 years being told by the show that their preferences did not matter. When the show asked them to buy a ticket, they declined. The boycott was not organized, it was organic. It was the natural consequence of 5 years of provocation, the accumulated cost of every clown joke and every scheduling marathon and every meta episode that had told the fans of the original show that their anger was the punchline. The film opened $10.5 million domestically, finishing 5th for the weekend. Its total domestic gross was $29.6 million. Its worldwide gross was approximately $52 million. Against a $10 million budget, the film was technically profitable, but by the standards of the superhero genre and the expectations that Warner Bros. Had for a Cartoon Network theatrical release, the numbers were disappointing. The box office performance became a scandal unto itself, but not because of the numbers. The scandal was about what the film did in its final moments and what those moments promised to an audience that had been waiting for over a decade. In the film's mid-credits scene, something unexpected happens. The screen glitches, the animation style shifts, and the original Teen Titans, the 2003 versions rendered in the visual style of the original series, appear on screen. They address the viewer directly. They say that they have found a way back. The scene is brief, cryptic, and electrifying. For the fans who had spent 12 years campaigning for the return of the original show, the scene felt like an answer, a confirmation, a promise that the show they loved was finally, at long last, coming home. The promise was not kept, though the complexity of its non-fulfillment deserves careful examination. The mid-credits scene was not a formal announcement. It was not confirmed by any Warner Brothers executive as a guarantee of a new series. It was, technically, just a scene in a movie, a piece of storytelling designed to send the audience out of the theater with a sense of anticipation and hope. But context determines meaning, and the context was impossible to ignore. For 13 years, the fans of the original Teen Titans had been told implicitly and sometimes explicitly that the original show was over, done, finished, not coming back. Every hope had been dashed. Every petition had been ignored. Every rumor of a revival had turned out to be false. And then, in a mid-credits scene of a Teen Titans Go movie, the original characters appeared, in their original designs, in their original animation style, and said the words, "I have found a way back." For anyone who had been following the story, and by 2018 the story had been running for 5 years, and had become one of the most documented ongoing controversies in the animation community, the scene was seismic. Fan forums that had been dormant for years reactivated overnight. Social media exploded with screenshots, frame-by-frame analyses, and speculation about what the scene meant. Entertainment journalists contacted Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers for comment. The comments they received were carefully non-committal, neither confirming nor denying that a revival of the original series was in development. The ambiguity was, depending on your perspective, either honest or strategic. If a revival was genuinely being considered, the studio could not announce it before contracts were signed and budgets were approved. If a revival was not being considered, the studio had an incentive to maintain the ambiguity for as long as possible, because the ambiguity generated attention, and the attention promoted both the film and the Teen Titans Go brand. Either way, the fans were left in a state of hope that the studio was in no hurry to resolve. The hope lasted approximately 1 year. During that year, the speculation was constant and intense. Fan communities compiled evidence for and against the revival theory. Every interview with a voice actor, every social media post from a Cartoon Network executive, every scheduling decision and programming announcement was analyzed for clues. The community became a kind of intelligence-gathering operation, sifting through publicly available information for any signal that the original Teen Titans was coming back. The scene could not be read as anything other than a promise. Not a legal promise, not a contractual promise. An emotional, a signal sent from a studio to an audience that said, "We see you, we hear you, and we are giving you what you have been asking for." The fact that the promise was embedded in a movie that many fans of the original series would not have seen without the promise is what made the eventual non-fulfillment feel so toxic. The promise brought them in. The non-fulfillment sent them away. And the gap between the two was filled with a betrayal that felt, to many fans, more personal than any previous disappointment. Or rather, it was kept in a way that satisfied the letter of the promise without satisfying its spirit. In 2019, Cartoon Network aired a special titled Teen Titans Go vs. Teen Titans, a crossover event that brought the original versions of the characters into the Teen Titans Go universe. The special featured both versions of the team interacting, fighting together, and acknowledging each other's existence within a shared multiverse. But the special was not the return of the original series. It was a Teen Titans Go special that happened to include the original characters. The tone was Teen Titans Go's tone, the humor was Teen Titans Go's humor. The original characters were guests in someone else's house, not residents returning to their own. The fans who had interpreted the mid-credits scene as a promise of a genuine revival, a new season of the original show, a continuation of the story that had been left unfinished in 2006, were disappointed. The disappointment was compounded by the timing. The mid-credits scene had been used by Warner Brothers' own marketing to generate interest in the film. Articles about the post-credits tease were published by entertainment outlets. Social media buzzed with speculation about what the scene meant. The tease drove ticket sales. It brought fans of the original series into theaters, fans who might not have otherwise seen a Teen Titans Go movie. And when the tease turned out to be a misdirection, or at best a partial fulfillment that fell far short of what the scene had implied. Those fans felt manipulated. The crossover special that eventually resulted from the mid-credits tease, Teen Titans Go versus Teen Titans, aired on June 29th, 2019. The special was 45 minutes long, and it brought both versions of the Titans together in a multiverse-spanning adventure. The original Titans were rendered in their 2003 designs, voiced by the same actors, and portrayed with a degree of respect that many fans found surprisingly touching. The special acknowledged that both versions of the Titans had value, that both versions existed for different audiences, and that neither version was superior to the other. But the special was still fundamentally a Teen Titans Go product. The humor was Teen Titans Go's humor. The pacing was Teen Titans Go's pacing. The original Titans were visitors in a world that did not belong to them, and the visit was temporary. By the end of the special, the original Titans returned to their dimension, the Teen Titans Go Titans returned to their default state, and the status quo was restored. The original show had not been revived. It had been borrowed. For some fans, the crossover was enough. Seeing the original characters again, hearing their voices, watching them interact with their comedic counterparts, provided a form of closure that 13 years of waiting had denied them. The special acknowledged that the original show existed, that it mattered, and that its characters deserved to be treated with respect. That acknowledgement, however brief and however embedded in a Teen Titans Go framework, meant something. For other fans, the crossover was a final insult. The original characters had been reduced to guest stars in the very show that had replaced them. Their brief appearance, far from constituting a revival, constituted a co-option. The original Titans were not coming back on their own terms. They were being used to generate ratings for the show that had taken their place. The crossover was not a tribute. It was a trophy, the conquering show displaying the defeated show's characters as proof of its dominance. The connection between the film's box office performance and the original series' future became a bitter irony that the fan community has never stopped discussing. If the film had been a massive hit, the argument goes, Warner Bros. Would have had the financial incentive to produce a genuine revival of the original Teen Titans. But the film was not a massive hit, and some fans believed that the film's underperformance was caused, at least in part, by the very audience that the mid-credits scene was designed to court, fans of the original series who refused to support a Teen Titans Go product even when that product contained a hint of the thing they actually wanted. The logic is circular and unprovable. Did the film underperform because fans boycotted it? Did fans boycott it because they did not trust a Teen Titans Go product to deliver what they wanted? Would a genuine revival have been greenlit if the film had grossed $100 million? Nobody knows. Nobody can know. But the questions themselves have become part of the scandal. A permanent what if that haunts the space between the show and its audience like a ghost that neither side can exorcise. The 10th scandal is the most recent, the most serious, and the one that has nothing to do with creative decisions or audience relationships. It is about a person. On March 4th, 2025, Greg Cipes announced publicly that he had been diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's disease. Cipes had been the voice of Beast Boy since the original Teen Titans premiered in 2003. He had voiced the character across both series, across 22 years, across hundreds of episodes. Beast Boy's voice was Greg Cipes' voice. The character and the actor were, for a generation of viewers, inseparable. Shortly after his public announcement, Cipes revealed that Warner Bros. Had ended his contract. He claimed that he had been fired on Valentine's Day 2025, shortly after sharing his diagnosis publicly. His words, reported by Variety and Deadline and subsequently amplified by entertainment outlets around the world, landed with an impact that transcended the usual parameters of voice acting news. Voice actor departures from animated series are typically minor industry stories, noted by fans and trade publications and forgotten within a news cycle. But Cipes' departure was different. It was public, it was emotional. It was tied to a diagnosis that millions of people around the world share or fear. And it involved a character, Beast Boy, who had been voiced by the same person for longer than some of the show's viewers had been alive. 22 years. That number deserves to sit for a moment. Greg Cipes began voicing Beast Boy in 2003 when the original Teen Titans premiered. He voiced Beast Boy through the original series' entire 5-season run. He voiced Beast Boy through the gap between the original and its successor. He voiced Beast Boy through all 9 seasons of Teen Titans Go, through the theatrical film, through the crossover special, through hundreds of episodes and thousands of lines of dialogue. The character's voice was his voice. The character's laugh was his laugh. The character's energy, his enthusiasm, his specific brand of goofball warmth was built from the raw material of Greg Sipes' personality, filtered through 22 years of performance and refinement. When that voice was removed from the character, something was lost that cannot be replaced. A new actor can learn Beast Boy's lines. A new actor can study the character's cadence and rhythm and emotional register. But a new actor cannot replicate 22 years of accumulated performance, the tiny adjustments that happen over decades, the way a voice actor's understanding of a character deepens with each passing season until the performance becomes less like acting and more like breathing, and picked up by entertainment outlets around the world, were direct and anguished. He described the loss of the role as a death, a word that carries particular weight when spoken by someone who has just been diagnosed with a progressive neurological disorder. Warner Bros. Did not confirm Sipes' account. Sources close to the production offered a different narrative. They said that producers had approached Sipes about stepping down from the Beast Boy role because his performance had been affected by his condition in ways that made it difficult to maintain the character's established voice. They said that Sipes had not been fired because of his diagnosis, but because of the practical impact that the diagnosis was having on his ability to perform the role. They said that the studio had offered Sipes the opportunity to voice a different new character on the show, and that Sipes had already recorded lines for this new character. They said that the studio had also offered Sipes a development deal for a potential future project that would star a character of his own creation. The distinction between being fired for having Parkinson's and being fired because Parkinson's affected your performance is a distinction that may matter legally, but does not matter emotionally. To the fans of the show, to the disability advocacy community, and to the broader public that encountered the story through news coverage and social media, the headline was simple. A man who had voiced a beloved character for 22 years was told he could no longer voice that character after he was diagnosed with a serious illness. The industry's response to the controversy was notably muted. Warner Bros. Did not issue a detailed public statement. The show's creators did not comment publicly. The network did not address the situation in any official capacity beyond the background statements attributed to unnamed sources. The silence was consistent with corporate practice. Companies do not typically engage in public disputes with former employees about the terms of their departure, but the silence felt, to the public watching the story unfold, like evasion. The timing of Sipes' departure also coincided with a broader reckoning within the animation industry about how studios treat their voice actors. In the years leading up to 2025, several high-profile disputes between voice actors and studios had made national news. The debate about AI-generated voices and the potential replacement of human performers with synthetic alternatives had intensified. The writers and actors' strikes of 2023 had centered in part on the question of how performers' likenesses and voices could be used by studios. The Sipes story landed in this already charged environment and absorbed its energy. Fans organized quickly. Social media campaigns demanding Sipes' reinstatement appeared within days of his public statement. The hashtag Justice for Beast Boy trended on several platforms. Voice actors from other animated shows expressed solidarity. The community that had spent over a decade arguing about Teen Titans Go found itself, for the first time, united in defense of someone connected to the show, even if the connection was specifically about the show's mistreatment of one of its own. The story became more complicated in April 2025, when Sipes posted on Instagram thanking Warner Bros. For keeping him working and supporting him through his health challenges. The post contradicted some of the characterizations in his earlier public statements, and it raised questions about the timeline and nature of his departure. Was he fired as he originally claimed, or was the separation more mutual than his initial statements suggested? Were the studio's alternative offers, the new character and the development deal, genuine acts of accommodation, or were they consolation prizes offered to soften the blow of losing the role he had created? The answers to these questions are unclear, and they may never be fully resolved. What is clear is that the situation generated a wave of public sympathy for Sipes and a wave of public anger at Warner Bros. That extended far beyond the Teen Titans Go fan community. The story touched something deeper than fandom. It touched the fear that everyone carries about what happens when your body stops cooperating, when the thing you have built your identity around is taken from you by a disease you did not choose. The story also arrived at a moment when the entertainment industry was under increased scrutiny for its treatment of performers with disabilities and health conditions. The broader cultural conversation about disability rights, about accommodation, about the difference between what the law requires and what decency demands, gave the Sipes story a resonance that extended far beyond the world of animated television. Advocacy organizations weighed in. Disability rights commentators wrote op-eds. The story became a case study in the ongoing debate about how corporations balance their business interests against their obligations to the people who make their products possible. The voice acting community in particular responded with a mixture of sympathy and alarm. Voice actors work in a uniquely vulnerable position within the entertainment industry. Their performances are their bodies, their voices, their physical abilities. A condition that affects the voice, whether it is Parkinson's or any other neurological or physical condition, is not just a health issue. It is an existential threat to a career that depends entirely on the body's ability to produce specific sounds. The fear that a diagnosis could cost you your role, that the thing you have built over decades could be taken from you because your body has changed, is a fear that every voice actor carries and that the Cypess story brought to the surface. The Greg Cypess scandal is different from every other scandal on this list. The other 9 are creative controversies, arguments about art and audience and intention. This one is a human story, a story about a person and a corporation, and the gap between corporate policy and human decency. It does not matter whether the show's creators intended to be cruel. It does not matter whether the studio's decision was legally defensible. What matters is that a man who gave his voice to a character for 22 years lost that character at the moment he needed it most. And the loss was public, and the loss was painful, and no amount of corporate explanation can make it not painful. The Cypess scandal also forced a reckoning with the nature of voice acting itself. A live-action actor's appearance changes over time, and audiences accept the change as natural. A television character ages with the actor who plays them, and the aging is woven into the story, but a voice actor is expected to sound the same forever. The character does not age, the character does not change. The character remains frozen in a state of permanent adolescence, or permanent energy, or permanent enthusiasm, and the actor is expected to match that state year after year, decade after decade, regardless of what is happening to their body. This expectation is, when you examine it closely, unreasonable. A voice is a physical instrument. It is produced by muscles, nerves, breath, and coordination. It is subject to the same forces of aging, illness, and change that affect every other part of the body. Expecting a voice actor to sound identical at 50 to how they sounded at 28 is expecting a physical impossibility. And when a neurological condition enters the picture, when the muscles and nerves that produce the voice are affected by a progressive disease, the impossibility becomes acute. The question of what studios owe to voice actors whose voices change, whether through aging, through illness, or through any other cause, is a question that the industry has never fully answered. The Cypess situation brought the question into public view, and the public's answer, expressed through social media and press coverage and fan campaigns, was clear. Studios owe accommodation. Studios owe loyalty. Studios owe the recognition that a 22-year relationship between an actor and a character creates obligations that transcend performance metrics. Whether that answer will change industry practice remains to be seen. What it has already changed is the conversation. Before Cypess, the replacement of a voice actor was a routine production decision made quietly and accepted without public comment. After Cypess, every future voice actor replacement will be scrutinized through the lens of what happened to Beast Boy. Every studio that replaces a long-tenured voice actor will be asked whether the replacement was necessary, whether accommodation was offered, whether the actor was treated with the respect that their years of service deserved. The precedent is set, and precedents, once set, cannot be unset. And here we are, 10 scandals, 10 collisions between a television show and the world around it. 10 moments where Teen Titans Go stepped outside the boundaries of a normal animated comedy and became something that people felt strongly about, that people argued about, that people organized around, that people remembered. There is a pattern that runs through all 10 of these scandals, and the pattern is simpler than the individual controversies suggest. The pattern is this: Teen Titans Go exists in a space that was already occupied. It occupied a time slot that belonged to another show. It occupied character designs that belonged to another version of those characters. It occupied a fanbase's emotional real estate without being invited. And every scandal on this list is at its core a conflict about occupation, about who has the right to be where, about what it means to replace something that people loved with something they did not ask for. The show's defenders would say that occupation is how culture works. New things replace old things, new shows replace canceled shows, new interpretations replace previous interpretations. The original Teen Titans replaced whatever was in its time slot in 2003. Someday, something will replace Teen Titans Go. The cycle is permanent. The anger is temporary. And the anger says more about the audience's attachment to the past than it says about the show's quality in the present. The show's critics would say that replacement is not the same as erasure. And that what Teen Titans Go did was not just replacement, but a kind of erasure, a deliberate dismantling of the original show's legacy, carried out in public, using the original show's own characters and voices. The anger is not about the past, it is about respect, about whether a show owes anything to the audience that made the brand and inherited valuable in the first place. Both positions have merit, neither position resolves the conflict. And the conflict, unresolved, is what makes Teen Titans Go one of the most fascinating shows in the history of American animation. Not because of its comedy, not because of its characters, but because of the conversation it has been having with its audience for 13 years. A conversation that neither side can win, that neither side can walk away from, and that neither side seems willing to end. The question that remains, the question that has been hanging over this entire video, is whether the scandals are the exception or the rule. Whether Teen Titans Go is a show that occasionally generates controversy, or a show that is fundamentally, structurally, constitutionally controversial. Whether the provocations are accidents or features. Whether the show stumbles into these collisions or seeks them out. The evidence accumulated across 10 scandals and 13 years and over 400 episodes suggests that the answer is both. Some of the scandals were genuine mistakes, decisions made without full awareness of their consequences. The Wally T situation, with its voice replacement and its complicated relationship to a real child's real wish, does not feel like a calculated provocation. It feels like a production that got tangled in competing priorities and did not handle the tangle well. But other scandals, Let's Get Serious, The Return of Slade, The Fourth Wall, were clearly deliberate. They were episodes designed to address the controversy, to acknowledge it, to engage with it, and ultimately to use it as creative material. The show did not just provoke its critics, it turned the provocation into content. The anger became episodes, the episodes became more anger. The anger became more episodes. The cycle was not accidental, it was self-sustaining, and the show rode it for years. And the replacement scandal, the original sin of the entire franchise, was neither accidental nor deliberate. It was structural. It was a consequence of decisions made above the show's creative team, decisions about network strategy and programming philosophy that had nothing to do with the show's writers or its fans. The show was born into controversy because the conditions of its birth were controversial. It did not choose to replace the original Teen Titans. It was created to fill a space that the original's cancellation had left empty. The anger was aimed at the show, but the cause of the anger was the system that produced the show. The evidence also reveals something else, something that none of the individual scandals can show on their own, but that the pattern, taken as a whole, makes visible. Teen Titans Go is a show that has been arguing with its audience for its entire life. From the moment it premiered, it has been in a conversation, sometimes a shouting match, with the people who watch it, the people who refuse to watch it, and the people who watch it specifically to find reasons to be angry. The conversation has taken place in episodes, in scheduling decisions, in marketing campaigns, in social media threads, in YouTube videos, in forum posts, in petition signatures, and in the millions of small acts of engagement and disengagement that constitute a television show's relationship with its public. The conversation has not been productive. Neither side has convinced the other. The fans of the original Teen Titans have not persuaded the show to become something it is not. The show has not persuaded its critics to accept what it is. The positions are fixed, the arguments are rehearsed, the same points are made, rebutted, and made again, with the same evidence and the same conclusions, year after year. And yet the conversation continues. That is, in the end, the most remarkable thing about Teen Titans Go. Not the scandals themselves, but the fact that the scandals have not ended the conversation. A show that generates this much controversy, this much anger, this much sustained opposition from a vocal and organized community should have collapsed. Under the weight of the hostility years ago, it did not collapse. It absorbed the hostility, it incorporated it, it turned it into content, and it kept going. There is something almost heroic about that persistence, even if you disagree with everything the show has chosen to do with it. The show has been told, loudly and repeatedly, for over a decade, that it should not exist. And it has responded quietly and consistently for over a decade, by existing anyway. That response is not an argument. It is an act. And the act, whatever you think of the show, is undeniable. All of which brings us back to where we started, April 23rd, 2013. A show premieres, it uses the same characters, the same voices, the same name. It is not the show that people wanted. It is not the show that people asked for. It is not the show that people spent 8 years campaigning to bring back. It is a different show wearing the skin of the one that came before. And the audience that had been waiting is asked to either accept the replacement or walk away. Most of them walked away, and the show kept going. And here is the thing about walking away that nobody talks about. Some of them came back, quietly, without announcing it, without posting about it on social media. Without joining any campaign or signing any petition, some of the viewers who had sworn off Teen Titans Go in 2013 or 2014 eventually found themselves watching it again. Maybe they had children of their own who liked the show. Maybe they stumbled across an episode while channel surfing and found themselves laughing despite themselves. Maybe they reached a point where the anger had burned itself out, and what was left was a kind of grudging curiosity about what the show had become in the years since they had last watched. This quiet return is the scandal that nobody talks about. The scandal of reconciliation, of softening, of discovering that the thing you hated is not as hateful as you remembered. It does not make headlines. It does not generate hashtag campaigns. It does not produce YouTube videos or forum threads or impassioned op-eds. It happens in living rooms and bedrooms, alone, late at night, when nobody is watching. A person presses play on a show they swore they would never watch again, and the show makes them laugh, and the laugh is involuntary and complicated and tinged with the memory of everything the show replaced. That private reconciliation does not erase the scandals. It does not undo the damage. It does not fix what was broken or restore what was lost. But it complicates the narrative, which is the most honest thing any analysis can do. The story of Teen Titans Go is not a simple story of a bad show doing bad things to good people. It is a complicated story of a successful show making controversial choices in a hostile environment, generating legitimate anger through legitimate provocations, and somehow surviving the anger to become one of the longest-running animated series in American television history. And the show kept going, 9 seasons, over 400 episodes, a theatrical film that critics loved and audiences ignored, a crossover special that brought back the ghosts of the original and then sent them away again, a voice actor who gave 22 years of his life to a character and was told his services were no longer required, a Make-A-Wish child whose voice was recorded and then replaced, a schedule that once consisted of nothing but one show, repeated endlessly, a loop of colorful characters arguing about pizza, while the rest of the network's programming withered in the margins. These are the facts of Teen Titans Go's existence. They are not opinions, they are not interpretations, they are things that happened, documented, and verifiable, as real as the show itself. And they tell a story that the show has never told about itself. A story about what happens when a creative work is born into a space that is already occupied by someone else's love. The love was real, the anger was real, and the show, despite all of it, was real too. Not the show that people wanted, not the show that people asked for, but a real show made by real people, watched by real children who did not care about the original and never would. A show that existed in the present tense while its critics lived in the past. A show that was, for better or worse, exactly itself. A theatrical film, a cultural footprint that extends far beyond the reach of the original series it replaced. The show that nobody asked for became the show that would not leave, and the scandals that surrounded it became part of its identity, inseparable from the comedy, inseparable from the characters, inseparable from the strange, stubborn, relentless thing that Teen Titans Go turned out to be. The toaster from the first video is still a toaster. The clown from The Return of Slade is still a clown. And the show is still on the air, still making people laugh, still making people angry, still refusing to be anything other than exactly what it has always been. If you enjoyed this video essay, subscribing means more than you might think. Sleep well. I will see you in the next one.